Hi friends, in this video I'm going to walk you through how to make my Palestinian grandfather's hummus recipe. I've been making this for a very long time and a lot of people have asked me to show how I do it. So here we go. Please bear with me, this is the first time I've ever made a video like this. I like to start by preparing all of my ingredients and getting everything ready ahead of time. I start with a 1-pound bag of dried garbanzo beans and I cook them in my Instant Pot. Here's how I prepare them. Rinse the dry beans. Add them to the Instant Pot with 1 teaspoon salt and 6 cups cold water. Set the Instant Pot to the bean setting and cook for 45 minutes on high pressure. Let it naturally release for 10 minutes and then do a manual release for any remaining pressure. Once they've cooled enough to work with, you'll want to separate the beans from the cooking liquid, but do not discard the liquid. That liquid byproduct is called aquafaba, and it's actually part of the recipe. It tastes much better than when you use plain water, which is what most commercial hummus uses. Fun fact, you can also use aquafaba to make a vegan meringue. Anyway, like I said, separate the liquid from the beans, but keep both. In the picture you see here, the aquafaba is in the jar on the left. I usually retain at least 2 cups worth of it, though I typically end up using only about 1.5 cups for this recipe. You might want to use more for a thinner texture. I usually make the beans the day before, let them cool, and store them and the aquafaba separately in the fridge overnight. Otherwise, this can turn into an all-day process. Alternately, you can use 4 cans of pre-cooked garbanzo beans and the aquafaba from the cans. I've done this before when in a hurry, but I vastly prefer the taste and texture of hummus made from home-cooked beans. If you are using canned beans, you might want to start with a little less salt than I've recommended and adjust at the end, since canned beans are usually already salted. I also use 1 cup of lemon juice and 1 tablespoon of lemon zest. I prep these ahead of time too. I buy a big bag of lemons, zest and juice them all, portion out the zest in tablespoons, and freeze it in something airtight until ready to use. By the way, the tablespoon-sized super cubes are useful for portioning and freezing things like citrus zest or pesto if you've never used those before. The juice either goes into a jar in the fridge, or if it works better for you, you can freeze the lemon juice in an ice cube tray. It keeps for a while either way. To get a full cup of lemon juice, it usually takes about 6 or 7 lemons, depending on their size. I do not recommend using bottled lemon juice and dried zest for this. You use so much of it that the freshness really matters. For garlic, I use 1 tablespoon, either fresh or roasted, but I strongly prefer roasted garlic. I like to use the roasted garlic that comes in the bag shown in the picture, which I buy from Winco. You can alternately roast garlic yourself. Slice off the top 1/4 to 1/2 inch of a head of fresh garlic to expose the tops of the cloves, then drizzle it generously with olive oil. Wrap it loosely in foil and roast it in an oven at 400 degrees for around 40 minutes or in an air fryer at 375 degrees for around 20 minutes. Let it cool and then squeeze the roasted cloves out of their skins. You can alternately use fresh peeled garlic or even minced jarlic, but fresh garlic gives the hummus a sharper bite. Roasted garlic gives it a rich, full-bodied flavor that I love. I also use 1 cup of tahini. I like the Mideast or Sadaf brands of tahini best. Joyva is okay and does tend to be more widely available. For the olive oil, I use about 1/3 cup, and I strongly recommend using a high-quality extra virgin olive oil from the Middle East. The one shown here is imported from Lebanon. If you can afford Palestinian olive oil, use that. It costs twice as much, but if you have the budget, it's worth it. I buy my olive oil, tahini, and sumac from Goody's Mediterranean Market on Lake City Way, which is a delightful little hole-in-the-wall shop I just love. The best way to avoid a bitter-tasting hummus is to make sure your tahini and olive oil are both high quality and fresh. I also use 1 whole bunch of Italian parsley, rinsed and with the stems removed, and 2 teaspoons of salt. The ground sumac, which you see off to the side, I use for plating at the end. Once everything is prepped, measure and set out all of the ingredients. Then it's time for the food processor. I use an old Cuisinart 9-cup food processor, which, as you'll soon see, I completely overload. I really need a bigger one for these large batches, but in the meantime, I fill this one to capacity and then some. So let's get started. The first step of the process is to mix the tahini by itself in the food processor. It separates in its jar or can, and it's far easier to pour it all into the food processor, scrape the denser paste off the bottom and add that too, and blend it all together until smooth, than it is to try to stir it smooth still inside the jar. Trust me on this. I've tried to skip this step and regretted my choices. Once it's blended smooth, measure out 1 cup and put the rest back in the jar. You can also at this point measure and set out your 1 cup of lemon juice, 1.5 cups of aquafaba, 1/3 cup olive oil, tablespoon of garlic, tablespoon of lemon zest, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Since it all goes in at the same time anyway, I stir together the zest, salt, and garlic in a little dish, like you see here. This next part involves some eyeballing of amounts. You're going to want to add about 1/3 of the cooked beans to the food processor, along with about 1/3 of each of your liquid ingredients, and all of the zest, salt, and garlic. Blend until at least mostly smooth. Then add another 1/3 of your beans and liquid ingredients, and blend until mostly smooth again. Then repeat the process with the last 1/3 of the beans and liquid ingredients. Trust me on this too, at least if you are stretching the capacity of your machine like I do. I regretted my choices even more the day I tried to just add everything in at the same time instead of adding it in thirds. Once you've got that mixture looking homogeneous, which may require stopping the machine to scrape the edges with a spatula more than once, go ahead and taste test it for flavor balance in case you like your hummus different than I do. It's important to know that the tahini and garlic flavors tend to come out more strongly after the hummus sits in the fridge overnight, so it's not a bad thing if the lemon seems overpowering at first, because it will end up tasting more balanced the next day. The lemon flavor mellows out overnight. If the texture is good but flavor seems off to you, try adding in another tablespoon or 2 of olive oil. Once you like the base flavor, add all your parsley leaves, and then blend, blend, and blend some more. You get a much lovelier hummus texture by letting it blend until you're beyond bored. As you can see here, my machine was too full to handle the parsley, so I had to use a spoon handle to shove the leaves down inside the hummus and get them blended in. And that's it. You might want to refrigerate it for a while before digging in, because all of the food processing can bring it up to room temperature. If not, leave it a bit warm. But if you don't care about that, it's ready to eat right away. It should be creamy and smooth, not stiff. It will firm up slightly in the fridge. If it seems grainy, it almost always just needs more blending or another splash of aquafaba mixed in. Don't be afraid to let the food processor run for much longer than feels necessary. I like to plate it with some extra olive oil, sprinkle some sumac on top, and add a few parsley leaves for garnish. That is, if I didn't forget to reserve some of the parsley for that, like I did this time. I also like sprinkling some pine nuts on top. You'll end up with around 10 cups of hummus. It will keep for at least a week in the fridge. In my experience, when I portion it into small, airtight containers and don't double dip into them when snacking, it can keep for 2 to 3 weeks. I hope this has been helpful and y'all enjoy giving it a try. Thanks for showing so much love to my Palestinian family's recipe. Like a lot of family recipes, this is just how we do it, so feel free to adapt it to your own preferences. Thanks for watching, and I'll love you forever, Grandpa.